Okay, so once you click on the assignment, view assignment, you'll see there's two links here. One is for the document that you're going to be filling out, and the other is for the website, the web link that takes you to the activity. The document actually has a lot of text on it, but there's just a handful of questions here. You've got to look at the major cities of the region that we're going to be exploring on the map. And you're going to be calculating the total area of that region, the total area of deforestation, and what percentage that represents. And then you're going to write a description of the area based on one of the satellite data maps we're going to look at. And I would say don't worry about answering this last question. It's basically repeating the earlier calculations but using a different map. So question 16, you do not have to worry about answering that unless you would really like to calculate it and compare the two pieces of data. So when you click on the link for the National Geographic website activity, it's going to bring you to this page. And initially it's a little bit misleading because at the very top it tells you that there's a website to link to. And it's a little bit easier if you just skip that link and go straight down to the questions and start with this link. So the National Geographic site lays this out step by step. And I think some of the difficulty comes in locating some of the features that they ask you to use within the program. So I'm going to go ahead and get this open. I like to open everything up in a separate window. I want to keep my questions here and available while I'm working through the activity. You will probably want to have your document open and just kind of tucked away off to the side so that it's available when you need to answer questions. And what I like to do is, because we're working with maps, is I'm going to actually pull the tab off, maybe. Oops, here we go. So I have a separate tab with the instructions listed here, and get back to those. And then I can have my map over here off to the side, and I can make this bigger or smaller as I need. So step one was to click on Imagery with Metadata, which is where we're at here. Step two says to click Open in Map Viewer, which I'll go ahead and do that now. And this is basically going to get me into the application where I can work with these map layers. Step three says click Content in the left panel. And some of you may have noticed that, excuse me, you can't see content. Some of you might see it. You can see in my map, nowhere does it say content. Content is actually this little icon right here. If I hover there, it says show contents of map. Some of you might actually have the word content there. So this icon says about this map. This is the content, and then this is basically the map legend. So sometimes it opens up to the map legend first. Other times it'll open up to, or then you would have to click on contents. So I've clicked on contents. It says zoom all the way out to the world view of the map. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out several times till I've got a world view. There's just our national view, and that's looks like the world. So, and then I enter a search for Rondônia, Brazil. So the search bar is in the upper right-hand corner. Rondônia. As soon as I start typing it, it will pop up, and this is going to, the map will then zoom to the location that I've typed in there, selected. I don't need this dialog box. And so Rondônia, once you have done that search, is this dashed line represented here. And there's a little bit of it kind of tucked off, this little finger here of the state that's tucked off there. I can always minimize that window or close that details window so that I can see more of the map. And then if I need it again, I can open it up this way. When you get to the digitizing point, I've noticed it's a little bit difficult to get the map with the boundaries to display fully on my screen. If I zoom out too much, I lose the boundary. And if I zoom in too much, I can't see the whole state. So I have found that this is really the most I've been able to show. And so you guys will have to play around with that, and your screen might be a little different. Um, like I said, I like to keep multiple windows open at the same time. And so, you know, if I do expand this completely, I may be able to get the state in a little bit better, which you could always do, and then minimize the window when you want to access the instructions. So the next question, or the next set of instructions, says to click on the base map on left and change to imagery with labels. My default is the image with labels, and so I really don't know that it's necessary to change that. The base map link is here, and this is actually kind of a cool feature, and it just shows you a variety of maps to look at. So that map I just chose was Imagery Hybrid. This map is just Imagery. So I think I'm going to work with the Imagery Hybrid. I don't really see an option for imagery with labels. So yeah, I'm using Imagery Hybrid because it does have the labels on there. I'll close that out. And then my next set of instructions, there's a couple questions to answer here on the document, question 6, and you can just type your responses in here. And then the next time we have to answer a question is on step 9. So I'm going to go back to my map, and the instructions. 7 says zoom out so the entire state of Rondonia is visible, which we already talked about that. I'm going to kind of move this back over. And then on the upper right, click measure, and then the area icon. The unit is in square miles. So the next set of instructions after that says to digitize around the country by selecting points and creating a polygon. So looking at our map, I'll go ahead and maximize this just so we can see as much of the state of Rondonia as we can. The measuring tool is here, and it actually allows me to measure distances or to measure areas, which is a nice feature. And then you can change the units here, but we want to be in square miles. And then I'm going to close out my details because I want to see the whole state without this blocking the view. And to digitize a region and create a polygon, remember a polygon is just a many-sided shape. A square is a polygon, a triangle is a polygon. And so we're going to create a polygon that mimics the shape of this state of Rondonia. And so in order to do this, I'm going to start by clicking in one location. And if you get a dialog box opening up, I find that if I just come back here, close this out, open it again, and then start my digitizing again, I can usually keep going. I'm going to maybe come down here so that if a box pops up. Now you can see there's a little blue line that is following my cursor, and every time I click, I'm creating a point along the state here, the state boundary, and I'm basically creating all the sides to my many-sided polygon. And I am putting lots of little clicks in, and you may notice that as I do this, I am creating kind of a dark shaded area feature that mimics the shape of the state. So you can do this quickly. It doesn't have to be really accurate. One thing to note is that to close the polygon and stop making the shape, you will double click on a point. And what is an easy mistake to make, is to double click on a point before you're ready to close it out. So I try to at least get a little distance between each point so that I don't close out my polygon too soon. So I work my way around here, and you might notice that as I'm clicking, the area is being calculated while I'm doing this in this area right here in the box. So I can go through. I'm going to try to finish this up quickly. I'm going to cut some corners here just to get it done. and then you can see how you make that polygon shape. Not too difficult. The trick is just not to get your points so close together that you end up double tapping too soon. Okay, so I'm going to close it out there. And so there's my shape, and the estimated area of the state is 91,561 square miles. Don't worry about the decimals in these activities. So I'm going to fill that information in on my document where it says total area of Rondonia. You will probably find if you do this yourself that you're going to end up with a slightly different size, and that's fine. Again, it's just an estimate. Okay, so I am going to reduce the size of my map again and look at the instructions. So I have figured out the area of Rondonia's total state area. The next question wants me to identify the area of deforestation. So I'm going to close this out. As soon as I click on this again, I lose that initial polygon. So the key to using satellite data is really to look for patterns in the data. And as I zoom in and zoom out, you'll notice that there's different patterns that become apparent. The initial pattern I see when I look at this map is the color, the changes in the color and the shades of the color. I've got blues here for water. There's brown would be probably mountain range. And then I've got these green shades here representing forested areas. And as I zoom in closer, the patterns change and new patterns are revealed. I'm going to zoom back to Rondonia just by clicking up here and hitting enter. And so the initial pattern I notice when I look at Rondonia is I have these dark green shapes, and then I have sort of these pale green and light brown areas as well. So that would be a new pattern that's revealed as I look more closely at the data. And if I zoom in even further, a new pattern emerges in the lighter shaded areas. You can see there's some striping patterns here, some rectangles and squares and more smaller polygons that are probably associated with a certain type of land use that I'm going to let you guys see if you can figure out what that is. So I'm looking for patterns. I'm going to zoom out just a tad here and find a city in Rondonia. You're asked early on to explore the cities, and I think I'm going to look at one of the larger cities here. Zoom out a little bit more. A little too far. I'm going to focus in on Rondonia again. I'm going to look at this top city here, Portovelo, and zoom in on that. And I'm going to be exploring the patterns in urban areas. So what does the satellite data show me when I zoom into an urban area? Okay, so again, we start to see even smaller squares and rectangles associated with cities. So those are patterns that I'm looking at when I look at the data, and those are the things I'm going to use to describe and interpret and deduce what I think is going on in this area, in this region. So if I click this, I think nope, sorry, I'm going to do enter here. So that's how I digitize a region, and that's how I look at the patterns and try to decide what's happening in the picture that I'm seeing based on the coloration and any textures that I see. Once you get through calculating the deforested area and the percentage of that deforested area, you're going to actually start looking at a different map. So I'm going to slide this one over, and question 11 or step 11 says open the moisture index, how wet or dry. And so again, I'm going to open this in a new tab instead of, so I can keep my instructions here. And this time I'm looking at a new set of satellite data. And there's a few steps that I need to go through before I get to the actual map I'm going to use. It says on the right-hand panel at the bottom, click the data source. So I actually need to scroll to, oops, sorry. I need to make this window a little bit bigger to actually get the panel. So here's the panel that's being referenced. If I scroll to the bottom of this, you'll see data source, a link to data source there. So I'm going to click that link to the, oops, I went a little too far here, to the data source. And then it says search for Landsat 8 moisture index. So I click on data source, and you'll notice there's a search window here. And I'm going to type in Landsat 8, and names start to pop up here, and so I see my Landsat 8 moisture index. I click on that, and then here's the map I'm looking for. So I actually will need to click a couple more links before I see the map. And this is where we started at with the previous map. We want to go to Open in Map Viewer. And now I have a different map that I'm using that has a different set of data here. This one opens up with the legend, where you can see I've got a scale that goes from dark brown to light or to dark blue, and some shades in between here. I'm again asked to search for the region I'm working with, the Rondônia region of Brazil. And then 15 says click contents again so I can see the two map layers. So first I'm going to search for Rondônia, Brazil, which is there. And so you may notice that it's kind of hard to tell which area is actually Rondônia. You might recognize the shape a little bit here, but if we go to contents, I can turn this data feature, the satellite data, on and off using this check. So when I turn that off, now I see a map, a topographic map of the state of Rondônia. And here's that boundary that I had outlined earlier. And some of the larger cities, Porto Velho, and I can turn this feature back on. So now I can kind of turn this off and on to try to gauge where I'm at. The other thing that I like to do is actually set this right next to the previous map I was working on. And so I'm going to make this one just a little bit smaller so I can get the general features here. And I can try to find similar shapes. So one of the ones that sticks out to me the most is this sort of, looks like the start of a horseshoe shape, a sideways horseshoe. Here, I can see that shape is also right here on my other map. There are these little small patches of forest here that I can recognize on the moisture index map that are right here. My large city of Porto Velho up here is most likely this kind of lighter green region on this map. And so I can sort of identify in each map where the specific regions are. I see a little bit of the striped patterning up here. So what does this scale actually tell us? If I go back to the details and look at the legend, the dark brown regions would represent the driest regions on a map. And when I get to the dark blue end of the spectrum, that would represent the wettest regions. And most of my data is falling between these shades of blue and maybe just barely getting into the brown shades here. So what that tells me is that these regions, this color, are wetter regions or more moist regions, and the regions that are colored in this coloring are drier regions of that area. Excuse me. And so the final task, I'm going to go back to contents here. The final task on the document is to describe, let's make this a little bit bigger. It says write a description of the deforested land using the moisture index legend. So using this satellite data, the legend is here and the scale that we're working with, you're asked to describe the deforested land using the moisture index. So what do you notice? Whoops, sorry about that. What do you notice about the deforested region, which would be in here, these lighter patches, about the moisture in those areas? Where do you see high amounts of moisture, and where do you see lower amounts of moisture, and why do you think that is? So once you've completed answering that question, you can go ahead and submit this document on Google Classroom. Again, you do not have to worry about that last question where you're just calculating areas again and digitizing. The last question wants you to calculate the percentage of deforested land in this map and compare it to your calculation for the first map. If you really are into the activity and doing that kind of math, you can go ahead and do those calculations. If you still would like some assistance with this assignment, again, you can join me at 2 o'clock. I will walk through this whole activity and we'll do the calculations together. Again, remember the values are estimates. If you're having a little trouble with the digitizing and getting those shapes, it can be a little tricky at times to do that. Just do the best you can. Get as close as you can. It doesn't have to be perfect, okay? And get a shape. If you have to miss that finger or not get this part, that's okay. Just get a rough estimate. And that, I think, is about all. I think that covers all the questions you will have, aside from some of the math questions, the calculations. So hopefully this answers your questions, and if not, you can find time to meet up with me today. And otherwise, I will see you all at council tomorrow.